勘違いするな。お前の作った力ではない。
Hello everyone, it's Six. Today we're going to be talking about or going over what would happen if all three Sannin were to fight Madara Uchiha, or another way I guess you could put it is, could the Sannin actually take down Madara? Similar to my last video, I'm going to establish which forms of the character are going to be entering the battle here. So Madara is going to be entering the battle in his Edo Tensei form as he appeared when he was summoned by Kabuto in the 4th war. Tsunade is going to be appearing in her 100 healings or Byakugo state. Jiraiya is going to be entering the battle in Sage mode along with Ma and Pa, like he did when he fought Nagato. Now in this video, I'm not going to be flexing my big, edgy, scaly debater man muscles and scaling Jiraiya to Kage or explaining to you why Edo Madara could possibly clap up Ishiki. I'd like to set this up as an actual battle between the combatants and, explain how these characters would interact with each other and some of the things Madara has to say. I also thought this battle would be fairly interesting because all the combatants here have sort of a legendary status within the verse. Madara being the guy compared to Hashirama, whose power is said to be so great that people just assume he's like some sort of fairy tale like Hagoromo, and Tsunade saying things about Madara such as his name itself is just power after Obito rolled up to the Kage summit with his sort of fake identity and just forced them into a war by saying his name was Madara. Of course the Sannin are all legendary as a group, with their own names being comparable to someone like Old Hiruzen level combatants who Kabuto believes is stronger than all the current 5 Kage in his old man state, and Ebisu saying that the current Konoha has absolutely no way to take down someone like Orochimaru, and they're going to need one of the great 3 to take down one of the great 3. A fairly long-winded intro, but I feel it was needed given the fighters we're dealing with. But now that that's out of the way, we can start with some scaling for the Sannin. The Sannin's goal in this battle, or the win cons I have listed out for them, are either try to change Madara's views and ideology and, bring him to the side of the Lee for Konoha, or immobilize him and then seal him away like the bad guy he is. So to start the Sannin scaling off, I'd like to actually address something that I happen to bring up in the video I did with Seth the Programmer that a lot of people got on my case for, where I seemingly arbitrarily claimed that the right Kage was Sannin level and didn't give any reasoning as to why. Fanbook 2, a book written by Kishimoto as well as the fans for Naruto, made by the fans for the fans, the ultimate source for Naruto that you helped create, is stated on the back of Fanbook 1, states that the legendary Sannin are said to be comparable to the Kage. This statement you can take to mean a few things. Either A, each Sannin is as strong as all 5 Kage, B, the Sannin as a group are comparable to the 5 Kage as a group, or C, that is strictly talking about reputation. I'm going to be going with interpretation B for the sake of the video. Now, going with interpretation B, I think that this statement should only talk about Jiraiya in his base form and not include his Sage mode, since it says that the Sannin are what is comparable to the 5 Kage, and when Jiraiya enters Sage mode, he says that he's left such titles in the past and he's now a hermit or sage. He's sort of transcended this level of Sannin that he used to be at. Sage mode is described in multiple databooks and by Pa himself to be a dramatic increase to your ninjutsu, taijutsu, and genjutsu. Taijutsu being defined in the databook as incredible speed and strength should mean that Jiraiya is all around much stronger and faster in Sage mode, which may seem a bit redundant to mention, and I know a lot of you probably thought that, but there is a surprising amount of people who actually think Sage mode isn't much of an amp to speed. This, along with the fact that Konoha 1 Decade 100 Ninja, a promotional guide written by Kishimoto to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the manga, states that Jiraiya during his training on Mount Miyaboku learned ninjutsu of incredible power that surpassed the other nations since the time of the Shinobi Wars. Now that we've established that Jiraiya has surpassed the title of Sannin, which made his team altogether the level of 5 Kage, we now have a team even stronger than the 5 Kage as a team working against Madara. Something else I'd like to mention for Jiraiya is that he's actually able to get big resolve amps in combat. We see this during his battle with Pain. Databook 3 actually described this as Jiraiya hardens his resolve and attacks and destroys Pain's eyes. So Jiraiya, with his resolved harden, is able to tag Pain before he can block or avoid, whereas Jiraiya tries to sneak attack this same Pain and it blocks his attack effortlessly. And the Animal Path blocks Jiraiya's fastest jutsu, said by himself and in the databook, which should also include his taijutsu, and force Jiraiya into admitting that if the battle continued the way it was going, he would certainly die even in Sage mode, which he kind of did. This is not to say Jiraiya stood absolutely no chance against Pain though, as Pain says himself, if we didn't have this secret of ours, we probably would not have won. There are a few issues with this statement at face value, but allow me to offer an interpretation of this statement that may be consistent and actually would have allowed Jiraiya to get the win on Pain, even if he doesn't necessarily scale to him. So I'm pretty sure we can agree that the secret Pain is talking about here is the fact that he had extra paths in order to come help him after the first three was defeated. This secret allowed him to catch Jiraiya off guard and tear his arm off after Jiraiya thought he had won the fight. If all 6 Pains were out here at this point and the frog genjutsu would have trapped them all, then Jiraiya would have beaten every path of Pain. Also, Jiraiya has Ma and Pa in his shoulders while in Sage mode, and Pa is said in the data books to be the strongest frog on Mount Miyaboku, and in Jiraiya's own words, in terms of Sage mode, he's a baby in swaddling clothes compared to those two. This also gives Jiraiya access to the sound genjutsu I mentioned just a few moments ago, which is stated in data book 3 to be the strongest genjutsu at least up to the time of volume 43, as that's as far as data book 3 will cover up to. This jutsu also bypasses all of the genjutsu barriers Nagato placed inside the Pain's mind. Nagato places these here to avoid enemy jutsu users from entering the Pain's mind and possibly gaining intel on him or the Akatsuki. This is something that Inoichi Yamanaka, Ino's father, the leader of the Yamanaka clan, says that he can't do, even though he's able to broadcast his thoughts to the entirety of the Shinobi Alliance. He says that getting through Pain's genjutsu barriers is gonna take him days. You could argue that the sound genjutsu is more powerful than Tsukuyomi since Itachi is listed in data book 3. However, you could also make the argument that it's not, because Tsukuyomi itself is not listed in data book 3. Now, moving on to Orochimaru, before we actually get into any of his feature scaling, I like to actually go over how he was in the past and what it actually was that made him change. We see in part 1, Orochimaru was a person completely obsessed with power. He thought the way to become the ultimate shinobi was to master any and all jutsu, and the only way he could do that is if he found a way to become immortal. Kabuto accepted this ideology and tried to imitate Orochimaru's life path. He injected himself with Orochimaru's DNA, he learned Edo Tensei, he went to the place where Orochimaru tried to learn Sage mode and he perfected it. He mixed his DNA with tons of people trying to become the ultimate life form, and even claiming that he was the closest thing alive to the Sage of Six Paths, even while Edo Madara was alive, even though he still had to wear glasses. Then, just like Orochimaru, he got stopped by Itachi, which, keep a mental note about that. I'll bring it back up later on in the video. Orochimaru says he saw how Kabuto did exactly what he wanted and it all still failed. So he's now interested in just watching Sasuke and what he's doing, since Sasuke, unlike Kabuto, did not copy him. Orochimaru, with this new outlook on life, instead of going directly to the battlefield like the Hokage or Sasuke did, or the rest of Team Taka, he decided to go help out the current 5 Kage who all got beat up by Madara. After healing Tsunade, Tsunade tells Orochimaru that if he had become like this sooner, Jiraiya might not have died, which you could use to imply one of two things. Either Orochimaru and Jiraiya together maybe could have boxed or brawled with Pain and beat him up, or that Orochimaru changing would have made Jiraiya not want to go to the Rain Village entirely. I think the latter is a lot less likely, seeing how even if Orochimaru changed, I'm sure Jiraiya would still have wanted to find the leader of the Akatsuki, especially since initially the mission was just strictly supposed to be an intel mission. Now we can get into some of the things that Orochimaru is actually capable of. So Orochimaru's got insane regeneration that someone like Madara would likely apply upon seeing as that Orochimaru can heal without hand signs from fatal injuries, and Madara sort of jerks off that aspect of Hashirama every time he sees Tsunade heal anything. Orochimaru also has abilities like the curse mark stun, which he used on Guru Zetsu, a guy who was overpowering or stalemating Edo Hiruzen, and also in his true snake form, whenever his blood happens to get exposed to the air, it turns into a numbing poison, and it actually will immobilize his opponent, which could possibly give the Sannin a way to sort of maybe seal Madara away. Regardless, we still have a weaker form of Orochimaru than the one put up against Madara in this fight, scaling to the 5 Kage in a group with the rest of his Sannin. Something a lot of people don't know about Orochimaru is that he actually varies in power throughout the series because of the different bodies he possesses. For example, in part 1, when he fought Hiruzen, the body he possessed at that time was actually weaker than Chunin exam Sasuke. This is stated by Orochimaru himself. The power between the bodies bodies might not change 1-to-1 with Orochimaru, but it certainly differs in power. Whereas the body he has in the war arc is a body of full Zetsu, which possesses large amounts of Hashirama cells, stated by Hashirama himself and Madara. And Hashirama cells are stated in this series to boost physical energy massively, to the point where if your body can't handle the Hashirama cells, you'll literally just die. The entire point I'm trying to make here with the Orochimaru and Jiraiya scaling is that this is a team stronger than the 5 Kage that Madara fought, and those 5 Kage, when implementing strategy and what they consider to be their full power, put Madara in a position to where he would have to respond with his full power that he considers the perfect Susanoo. Moving on to Tsunade, I'm going to make this part fairly brief since there isn't much to talk about when it comes to Tsunade during this fight, because her versus Madara already happened and she needs help to even attempt to take him down. As far as where she scales in relation to the other two is fairly irrelevant. We just know that she's slower than the Raikage, but punches and kicks much harder, shown by when she blows off an entire side of Madara's Susanoo ribcage, when the Raikage amped by Inoki could only make small cracks in the same Susanoo. We could finally talk about fucking Madara. So Madara, he's kind of like a madman, right? Not only in power, but in like ideologically and philosophically as well, right? He's just like a different kind of guy. So before we get into his scale, let's talk about some of that. Madara's own words: everywhere in this world, wherever light strikes, there are shadows. So long as there's a concept of victors, the vanquished also exists. The selfish intent of wanting to preserve peace initiates wars, and hatred is born to protect love. This is the hardest worldview of any villain in Naruto has to defeat, because it's quite simply just true. Even in Madara's plan to save everyone and put them all under the infinite Tsukuyomi, where they can all live out their dreams in their perfect world or whatever he wants, for this plan to work out in its entirety, Madara has to win and everyone else has to lose. This is Madara's philosophy. Madara is a man who hates weakness. It's a byproduct of growing up being one of the strongest guys around, which is why he never really respects people until they're on his level, like Hashirama or 8th Gate Guy later on in the war. Madara is also presented like this even in his Edo form. He's just an unstoppable monster compared to everyone else we see currently alive. When Itachi is speaking of undoing the Edo Tensei, the page cuts to Madara while he's finishing his sentence. It's essentially saying Itachi is trying to take down Madara, and even in the end, when Itachi reaches his goal to take down the Edo Tensei, it still doesn't take down Madara. I know this is not a direct display of power. I'm just trying to say that narratively, no one around at this time can take down someone like Madara. Madara has also had a lot of time to rethink his philosophy over and over again, and he's lived a very long life hidden away. And in his own words, the longer you live, the more you realize the pain and suffering and futility exist in this reality. Madara also looks down on the Konoha Shinobi's philosophy, the will of fire, and the rest of the 5 Kage as well. He mentions this whenever he's about to end them all with his perfect Susanoo. This, on top of Madara's distaste for weak people, I think eliminates the first win con we have for the Sannin, which was to change his worldview and bring him to their side. Madara also likes to demoralize and talk down to his opponent, so it's likely he'd take a look at Jiraiya with his stupid, imperfect, trash sage mode and tell him, you know, you're trash in comparison to Hashirama. Hashirama had a perfect sage mode. He was the ultimate shinobi. You know, we already saw how he talked to someone like Tsunade, who thinks the will of fire can be passed down from generation to generation. His idea is that the only thing handed down at this point is hate. There's a feat that a lot of people like to point to when talking about Madara versus the 5 Kage, which is when Tsunade seemingly manages to punch a hole in Madara's chest, and then after that he sumps out a wood clone. However, this interpretation it seems doesn't really make sense considering Madara's statement about Tsunade being slower than A and his ability to outspeed A earlier in the fight. The wood clone being tagged by Tsunade instead of actual Madara himself can also be consistent with how we know wood clones don't scale to you whenever you use them. As stated by Madara, wood clones can vary in power. When he's fighting Hashirama as an Edo, he says that Hashirama is pouring too much power into his original body, so his wood clones are virtually fodder and he one-shots it with his Susanoo. Tsunade herself also tries to consider this a feat by saying to Madara, yes, you may have outwitted us with your doppelganger, but from another angle you could say we managed to corner you into having to substitute a doppelganger for yourself, to which Madara's response is simply that, not really, it's kind of just a 5-on-1, and we later learn that Madara just isn't using his full power anyway. This is also not in line with how substitution jutsu is stated to work in the past. The point of the jutsu is to switch your body out with another object so fast your opponent thinks they hate hit you when in reality you weren't there. It uses body flicker to accomplish this, a technique that amps your movement speed greatly, so it's much more likely that Madara actually substitute prior to being punched. Madara's superiority to these 5 Kage is also very clearly displayed. Whenever he actually wants to get things done, he just rips Tsunade in half and heads to Obito. He leaves the rest of the Kage on the ground to die. Madara in his weakened Edo state is also able to hold back a Sage Lord Hashirama in his weakened Edo state, and the two even somewhat tie at the end of their fight again as Edos, where Hashirama ends up with tons of Rinnegan rods in his back and Madara is wrapped in a wood dragon and subsequently put under the Dita Gates, which suppress your will to fight and chakra. Hashirama is someone who Orochimaru blatantly admits is much more powerful than him when using the Edo Tensei binding. He says that Hashirama is simply different and that he can break out of his binding whenever he feels like. Also, whenever Tobirama flares up his chakra, you see everyone is sort of shocked that he's doing it, but you can definitely make the case that no one is actually scared here, just surprised that Tobirama would randomly start spiking his chakra and wanting to fight in the middle of a conversation with Sasuke. Sasuke, when feeling this presence from Tobirama, doesn't even turn on his Sharingan. However, when Hashirama turns up his chakra, everyone else in the room starts to legitimately get scared. We see Jugo move to protect Sasuke. Orochimaru starts to put up defenses. Suigetsu literally starts melting, and Tobirama looks at Hashirama, and the data book elaborates on this scene in particular and says that Hashirama actually subdued Tobirama with just his glance here. So we have the possibility that a casual flex from Madara being enough to make one of the members of our other team cuck down, that being Orochimaru. I'm sure I don't need to get into why Madara is above Sage Jiraiya. I think a lot of people would agree with that, but I'll do so anyway for the edgelords out there. Sage Naruto is stated to have surpassed his predecessors after one-shotting the Asura path with the Rasengan. In context, it would be referring to Minato and Jiraiya, as we see a silhouette of the two standing behind Naruto before Gamabunta asks Paul if Naruto reminded him of those two, to which Paul's response is that indeed, and he thinks to himself Naruto has surpassed his predecessors. The common issue I hear people have with this statement is that, well, Naruto mastered Sage Mode and Jiraiya didn't, so it's only talking about Sage Mode. And to be fair, there is a databook statement to somewhat back up this interpretation. However, it's important to take a look at the narrative here and look at it the way of Naruto is brought to Mount Miyaboku in order to train and learn Sage Mode to defeat an opponent that literally killed Jiraiya, and even if he doesn't accomplish the goal of finishing Pain off, Naruto is sent into battle after his training is complete, so he should have surpassed Jiraiya by the time of landing on the battlefield. You can also say, due to how Sage Mode functions, that Naruto surpassed Jiraiya because Naruto in his base simply has more chakra than Jiraiya, and entering Sage Mode is about mixing energies with your current chakra supply to a 1-to-1 ratio in order to make yourself stronger. So Naruto has a better grip on nature energy than Jiraiya does, and he's able to not only enter Sage Mode on his own, but maintain it without getting any of the frog-like features we see Jiraiya have. Just like Pa says, Naruto has a Sage Mode that surpasses Jiraiya's. While more chakra doesn't inherently mean you're stronger than another person, as evident by Naruto himself. In part 1, he has more chakra than Kakashi, but he's not stronger. More chakra and better chakra control should lead to the conclusion that Naruto is indeed stronger than Jiraiya. I could get into all the elaborate ways Madara scales over Sage Naruto, but for now we'll just say he scales over KCM2 Naruto in the War Arc. KCM2 is the full power of Naruto and Kurama put together, as well as it being stated by Minato and Naruto that Naruto still needs to master Kurama's chakra in order to fight with Obito. After he sees Naruto has already mastered Sage Mode, and he says that he was watching the Pain fight the entire time, along with the Kurama statement that Kurama was mad at Naruto for trying to get Sage Mode when he had his power inside of him, should imply that KCM2 is stronger than Sage Mode, at least in the Pain arc. And if that's not good enough for you, half of Kurama is able to box up a mental amp Sage Naruto during Naruto's training to acquire KCM1. So KCM2 over Sage Mode, and Madara is just blatantly scaling 2 or above KCM2. The only real way the Sannin have of winning realistically is for Ma and Pa to try to use the frog genjutsu to immobilize Madara and have them seal him away while immobilized, but this sadly won't work either. There's actually a scan to imply in order to put a Biju under genjutsu, you have to have a chakra supply similar to it, as stated in Databook 3 referencing half of Kurama. There was once a time it was controlled by Madara Uchiha's eye. However, right now there's no one who can control its chakra. Biju are obviously giant chakra monsters. They are completely made out of it, even the organs they have. The issue I hear most people having with this statement is that Obito is alive and he controlled full Kurama. However, it's important to remember this statement comes from Databook 3, and Databook 3 only covers up to volume 43 of the manga, and up to this point Obito is still denying having any involvement in the attack on Konoha. However, if that response isn't adequate enough for you, then Obito also has this narrative built up for his Madara persona he created, that he is weakened from his battle with Hashirama and nothing but a shell of his former self. I believe we see someone with Biju levels of chakra fail to get put under genjutsu whenever Sasuke is fighting against the Raikage, or more specifically, whenever the Raikage is fighting against Jugo, Sasuke actually looks at the Raikage while putting up a hand sign indicative of him molding chakra, and the Raikage says, "I am no weakling, I can't be taken down by mere Sharingan." Then later on in the war arc, we see Madara is able to take down the Raikage with just his Sharingan, or with, well, I guess he had EMS, but it's just saying that the Raikage, someone with Biju levels of chakra, as stated by Karin, can be controlled by just a Madara wood clone. So even Madara's wood clones contain these Biju levels of chakra. Madara can also genjutsu the full nine tail, so he should have a chakra similar to that level, whereas no one alive can control half Kurama, that being Ma and Pa. So since Madara can control full Kurama, they can't control half Kurama. He should have more chakra than them, and they should not be able to put him under genjutsu. And if all that is not a good enough explanation as to why Madara has Biju levels of chakra or higher, Madara's Susanoo is stated to rival the Biju, and it should be full Kurama he's talking about, since his Susanoo was able to tank a Biju bomb from it. His Susanoo is made out of his chakra, so there's another way to say Madara is that level in terms of a chakra supply. I think I made it pretty clear who's going to win this fight, but I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments. Maybe you think Madara would get cocky and the Sannin would catch him off guard, play on his overconfidence or something like that, take him down. You could also leave video suggestions down below. Maybe there's another versus battle you want me to cover, or another anime you'd like to hear me talk about. I'd like to talk about Dragon Ball and Jujutsu Kaisen as well. Other than that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you heard, and have a nice day.